The Anerostat, a story of silk, steam, and sabotage. Logline. In the desperate winter of 1864, as the Confederacy's secret weapon, a silent, invisible airship capable of striking Washington, D.C., nears completion, a disgraced and ailing Union balloonist and a brilliant and enigmatic seamstress-turned-spy must unravel the plot and stop it, using the nascent science of meteorology and a web of clandestine contacts before the war is lost from the skies. Overall story structure and synopsis. This story will be structured in 3 parts, totaling approximately 15 to 20 chapters. Part 1, The Shadow and the Silk, chapters 1 to 5. Introduces our protagonists, Professor Erasmus Thaddeus Finch, a once celebrated aeronaut and scientist, now dismissed as a crackpot for his theories on aerial navigation and upper atmospheric currents, and Eleanor or Nell Vance, a Washington dressmaker to the political elite who runs a sophisticated spy ring using her clients' gossip and fittings as intelligence sources. The Union is reeling. Ulysses Grant's overland campaign is a bloody stalemate. Sherman is stalled before Atlanta. Mysterious, silent explosions begin to occur at Union munitions depots around Richmond, with no enemy aircraft in sight. Finch, monitoring his weather instruments, detects an anomalous atmospheric pressure readings he believes are caused by a large, high-altitude vessel. No one believes him. Nell intercepts a cryptic message sewn into the hem of a dress for a Southern sympathizer. The Anerostat is complete, awaiting the Tidewater window. A desperate War Department, aware of Nell's network and Finch's lone voice, must forcibly pair them to investigate this phantom threat. Part 2, The Hunt for the Ghost, chapters 6 to 12. Finch and Nell's relationship evolves from hostile suspicion to a deep reliant partnership. He provides the scientific mind, she provides the street smarts and intelligence network. They piece together the puzzle. The Anerostat is not a hot air balloon, but a rigid-framed airship, powered by a silent steam engine using a revolutionary lifting gas, a secret formula, that makes it buoyant without the telltale heat and smoke of a fire. Their investigation takes them from the sewers of Washington to the drawing rooms of traders, and into a deadly mouse and cat game with the Anerostat's creator, the brilliant and ruthless Confederate inventor, Dr. Alastair Fontaine, a man with a personal grudge against Finch. The climax of Part 2 is a near disaster as Finch, in his own patched-together balloon, attempts to intercept the Anerostat on its first test flight over Chesapeake Bay, only to be outmaneuvered and nearly killed.
Part 3, The Tidewater Gambit, Chapters 13, Epilogue. Fontaine's plan is revealed. Using Finch's unpublished research on high-altitude jet streams, the Anerostat will launch from a hidden location in Tidewater, Virginia, and use the fast-moving air currents to glide silently over Washington, D.C. It will not carry bombs, but canisters of a new, terrifying chemical weapon, chlorine gas, to be released over the Capitol, the White House, and the War Department, decapitating the Union government. Knowing they cannot stop the technology, Finch and Nell must outthink Fontaine. They must predict the exact window of weather conditions the Anerostat needs for its attack. The final act is a triple-threaded narrative. Nell infiltrates the launch site to sabotage the airship. Finch, in a desperate race against time, prepares his own risky countermeasure, a high-altitude balloon armed with incendiary devices to set the hydrogen-filled Anerostat aflame in the sky. The Union Army, finally convinced, mounts a conventional assault on the launch site as a diversion. The story concludes with a breathtaking aerial duel in the jet stream, the foiling of the plot, and the profound, personal cost paid by the heroes. The epilogue shows how their efforts, though erased from official records to avoid panic, changed the course of the war and laid the groundwork for future aviation and intelligence services. Chapter 1. The Crackpot and the Seamstress. Washington, D.C., November 1864. The wind that sliced down from the Potomac had a personality, and Professor Erasmus Thaddeus Finch decided it was a spiteful one. It wasn't a clean, honest cold. It was a damp, insidious chill that wormed its way through the cracked window frame of his Georgetown garret and settled deep in his bones. It carried the smell of coal smoke, horse manure, and the faint, coppery tang of despair that had hung over the city for 3 long years. Finch, at 58, was a man composed of angles and indignities. His frame, once robust enough to command the basket of a hydrogen balloon before cheering crowds, was now gaunt, stooped by a persistent rheumatism and a more persistent sense of failure. He stood at his workbench, a long, cluttered slab of wood dominated by a complex and seemingly chaotic apparatus of glass bulbs, brass tubes, and columns of mercury. This was his aerospheric differential barometer, or so he called it. To the few visitors he'd had in the last year, it looked like the mad scribblings of a drunk physicist. His fingers, clumsy with cold, adjusted a fine brass screw. One of the mercury columns quivered. He leaned in, his breath fogging the cold glass, and squinted. There it was again, a fluctuation. Not the gentle, predictable ebb and flow of atmospheric pressure he'd charted for decades. This was a sharp, almost imperceptible dip, a hiccup in the sky's rhythm. It was the 3rd time this week. "Anomalous," he muttered to the silent room, the word hanging in the air like his breath. Or an idiot with his instruments. He knew he wasn't an idiot. That was the problem. He had been the preeminent aeronaut of his day, a man who had spoken of transatlantic flight when others were still wary of train travel. He had dined with senators and written papers read in London and Paris. But his theories had outstripped the era's patience. His obsession with etheric currents and stratospheric navigation had seen him laughed out of the Smithsonian, then out of the War Department's Balloon Corps, a unit he had helped found. "Fanciful," Secretary Stanton's aide had sniffed, dismissing Finch's detailed plans for a dirigible corps.
Now, the Balloon Corps was disbanded, and Finch was a relic, measuring ghosts in the air while real men died in the mud of Virginia. His eyes drifted from the barometer to the only spot of warmth and order in the room, a small framed daguerreotype on the mantel. It showed a younger, brighter-eyed Finch, his arm around a smiling woman with kind eyes. Sarah. She had believed in his flying machines. She had called them symphonies of silk and science. The cancer had taken her swift and silent, much like the phantom he now suspected was haunting his instruments. Some losses hollowed a man out. Others filled him with a cold, singular purpose. The scratch at the door was so faint he almost missed it. Not the landlord. His knock was a percussive demand for rent. This was deferential, almost secretive. He opened the door to find a young woman, no more than 25, swathed in a heavy, practical wool cloak, its hood pulled up against the wind. She held a large, flat portfolio case. "Professor Finch." Her voice was low and clear, with a hint of the North in its vowels. New York, perhaps. "Who is asking?" he said, his tone sharper than he intended. He was unaccustomed to guests, especially not well-spoken young women. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am a modiste." She saw his blank expression. "A dressmaker. I was told you are a man of particular knowledge." "A knowledge the world has little use for, Miss Vance. You have the wrong address for a gown."
A faint smile touched her lips. "It is not for a gown. It is for a puzzle. May I come in?" Reluctantly, he stepped aside. She moved into the room with a quiet grace, her eyes taking in the chaos of books, charts, and instruments without a flicker of surprise. She didn't look like a spy, but then, Finch supposed, the best ones never did. He'd heard whispers, of course, of a seamstress whose network of informants stretched from Richmond society to the Washington docks. He'd dismissed it as tavern gossip. She set her portfolio on a cleared space on his table and unlatched it. Inside were not fashion plates, but a series of intricate technical drawings. His breath caught. It was an airship, but unlike any he had ever designed. It was sleek, a great, elongated fish of a vessel, with a rigid framework sketched in faint lines. A propeller was mounted at the stern, not driven by a muscular crew, but by a compact, complex engine. "A steam engine," Finch whispered, his scientific mind overriding his suspicion. "But the weight! The boiler alone!" "Note the design," Eleanor said, pointing a gloved finger. "Multiple small tubular boilers, highly efficient, and the lifting agent is not hot air or hydrogen." "Then what?" Finch demanded, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. "That is the puzzle," she said, meeting his gaze. Her eyes were a startling shade of gray, like polished slate. "Our agent in Richmond could only get these partial schematics. She called it the anerostat. She was found floating in the James River 2 days later with a bayonet wound that the provost marshal is calling a robbery." Finch stared at the drawings. This was it. The source of his anomalous pressure readings, a silent, engine-driven airship. It was his own dream perverted into a weapon. "Why come to me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because you are the only man in Washington who looked at the sky and saw something more than weather," she said simply. "The War Department thinks it's a fantasy, a Confederate deception. But you and I, Professor, we know that the most dangerous threats are often the ones people refuse to believe in." She pulled a small folded piece of silk from her portfolio. It was a delicate cream-colored fabric, embroidered with a floral pattern. She handed it to him. "Look at the stitching in the border, the one that seems slightly off." Finch fumbled for his magnifying glass. Holding it to the lamplight, he saw it. Woven into the decorative scrollwork was a message in a tiny, precise hand. It was a single, chilling phrase. "The thread of destiny is spun. The needle awaits the north wind." "The north wind," Finch murmured. "A weather condition, a specific jet stream." Eleanor Vance nodded, her face grim. "They are waiting for their window, Professor, and when they get it, they will use this thing to sew a shroud for Washington. I need you to help me find the needle before it pierces the heart of the Union." Outside, the spiteful wind moaned against the window, and for the first time in years, Erasmus Thaddeus Finch felt a fire ignite within him. It was not the warm fire of vindication, but the cold, clear flame of a coming storm.